Hey friends, welcome back to more Reddit stories about entitled people, crazy people, and all that kind of stuff. It's time yet again to read about some more seriously unhinged people, so let's get into today's Reddit posts. Student photographed me in a bikini and is sharing it around school. I'm a school teacher and I was just enjoying my weekend with my kid at the pool when I saw one of my students was there. I didn't really mind since I thought he'd at most come up and say hi or otherwise just not notice or leave me alone. I didn't see him after the first sighting of him, so I just assumed he'd gone home and didn't think anything of it. I came into school the next day and noticed lots of students were looking at me. I teach high school, so they're smart enough to not let slip to me what was wrong. It was bothering me, but since the only answer I ever got was, "Oh, nothing, miss," I just left it and hoped it was nothing important. On my lunch break, another member of staff a similar age to me, early 30s, told me an image of me in a bikini was going around the school, and one of the students had shown him it thinking it was funny. I've since seen the photo, and it's not exactly flattering. My child can't be seen, but it shows most of my belly, which is bigger than I'd like, and I'm clearly out of breath. I can't remember why, but it will have been from chasing my 6-year-old about. I found it really embarrassing, but I'm not sure how to approach it. I know which student took it, but how do I bring it up with them? Update. The student shared it with 90% of his year and some teachers. I've spoken to the student's parents, although they didn't seem too bothered by the story of what he'd done. The thing which seemed to shock them most was the idea of me wearing a bikini. They told me they'd speak to him, which is probably just an attempt to get me to shut up and leave them alone. I've also informed admin, who said they'd look into it, but I haven't heard anything since, so I doubt anything's going to happen on that front. As far as I can tell, what the student did wasn't technically illegal, so there isn't a whole lot I can do to him. Laughing it off seems like the best option for me. Also, special thank you to all the creeps messaging me and asking me to send them the photo. Someone asked Cops of Reddit what simple noise complaint call blew way out of proportion, and here's a response. I'll throw in my story here, why not? I'm a police officer and worked in Harlem, New York City for 8 years. Have since moved over to Jamaica, Queens, New York City. But I was driving my sergeant that night and we were at the corner of 145 and 8th Avenue. There's a Popeyes in that corner, but above it is 5 stories of apartments. We're stopped at the light heading westbound and all of a sudden we start hearing a loud screaming coming from one of the windows above Popeyes. It was the summer and our windows were open, so my sergeant looks up and says, "Holy shit." So I immediately leaned down and looked out the windshield and see a white lady in her 40s hanging out the window screaming at the top of her lungs. She's covered in blood, her hair is a mess, and she's screaming for help. I quickly pull the car over and ask for an additional while we go up the stairs to the apartment. When we exit out of the stairwell, there's smeared blood all over the walls leading into the apartment, which has its door cracked open. We head in slowly, guns drawn, and we see a man step out from the bathroom who doesn't have a single scratch on him. We scream at him to get on the ground and quickly cuff him up while the screaming continues in the back room. As we get him up off the floor, our additional shows up, and we quickly pass him off to them and head to the back of the apartment, guns still drawn towards the screams. As we round the corner into the living room, we see a woman in a torn undershirt covered in blood and scratches, and she has a cat on her back and she's whipping her body around trying to get it off her. She slams herself into the wall and the cat finally lets go and falls to the ground. It looks at us and heads back towards the lady, when all of a sudden she kicks it like a football. And I mean Sebastian effing Janikowski type kick. And it flies through the air and almost hit the ceiling as it bounced off the wall and scurries behind the couch. I asked her what is going on and if her boyfriend did this to her, and she screams at us, "No, this f***ing cat is trying to kill me." Needless to say, we quickly get the guy out of cuffs and have to call ESU to come catch this psychotic cat. That's one that will stay with me till retirement. Neighbors disfigured my trees and bushes. Claim previous owner gave them permission. I moved this month, Washington State, and my yard borders windows of the neighboring property. The neighbor's yard is on the other side of their house, so their kitchen and living room plus one of their upstairs bedroom, and from what I can best ascertain, the window to a study, are pressed right against the dividing line property between the 2 yards, a small stone path. Along the edge of my property, but not overlapping with the divider, which a surveyor has verified is accurate when we were buying the home, we have 3 black walnut trees and 4 bushes. We're not 100% sure of what they are, but are sending pictures to a botanist friend and asking the internet. The best guess is honey locusts. About a week after we moved in, the new neighbors approached us and said the previous tenant had promised to trim the trees because they blocked the view out of their windows. I called the previous owner and he said he promised nothing of the sort, and half the reason he planted the bushes along the existing tree line was because the neighbors complained about his cookouts in the yard, making them feel as though they had to draw their curtains for privacy, which they didn't like. So the bushes were essentially a privacy hedge. The previous owner did just move into assisted living for dementia patients though, so I am waiting to get double confirmation from his daughter. We told her sorry but no, both because the trees provide nice shade, and without the bushes on the lower level they'd be able to see directly into our house and vice versa. We went away for the weekend and found 5 large branches and a dozen smaller branches missing from our trees, exactly where their windows were blocked. The trees look hideous and diseased now because of these giant bald patches, and no longer provide privacy or adequate shade. One of our bushes was completely gone, 2 others crudely uprooted from the ground and unsalvageable. The neighbor said the black walnut trees had been there since he moved in 60 years ago, and the bushes had been in 15 years. I figured I was screwed, because we don't have security cameras or anything to prove they did this. But as a last-ditch attempt, I sent them an email asking if they knew what had gone on, to which they had the audacity to reply as though they'd done us a favor. Their exact words, "Yes, we decided it was unfair for you to shoulder the burden of the previous property owner's unfinished business, so went ahead and had a crew take care of it out of our own pocket this weekend. No need to thank us. Merry early Christmas." I'm irate, especially because I'd bought my girlfriend a bench swing for one of the trees for Christmas, something she's always talked about having. The trees were not crossing their property line and the bushes were solidly within our own property as well. As aforementioned, there's a small dividing stone pathway between the 2 properties, but I also had a recent official survey done just before we moved in. I consulted 3 separate arborists officially, plus had an arborist friend check things over unofficially. The uprooted bushes were honey locusts, and the branches cut from my black walnut were valuable lumber. It was also determined that since the bushes and trees were acting as privacy barriers and no longer served that purpose, that I would require extra compensation to come up with a means of a new privacy barrier. It was initially going to be $2,300 for the missing honey locusts, $1,600 for the first uprooted one, and $1,800 for the second. Then, sweet Jesus, then we got to the issue of the black walnut trees. One was cut in such a way that it was permanently damaged and will likely have to be removed, so costing them $17,000. The next deemed to have lost enough lumber to be worth $4,000, and the final one $2,500. This was the initial decision. There were just a few more steps before everything was finalized. But then, we had had 2 arborists at this point, the first and then a second opinion. Then a third, the first we ever called, who came highly rated but was unable to get to us anytime soon, had a cancellation and got in contact. We figured, why not? Anything to fortify our case. He comes and looks and observes our trees have been afflicted by thousand canker disease, and they'll all have to be removed. And the neighbors may have even exposed other old vulnerable trees on our property that they didn't even touch to this disease. The first arborist had raised the concern, but no one caught it until this arborist, as it was still in its early stage. All told, 3 other less valuable trees on my property had to come down. All black walnut trees had to come down. And not only do they owe me $158,000, but they'll be charged with criminal trespassing. Now, I didn't want to be a horrible, vindictive person and target an elderly couple over a dispute like this. So I asked around to other people in the neighborhood and asked what their experience has been with these neighbors. Resoundingly, they said, "Do it, press charges." Apparently, in the years they've lived here, they've called the police on kids having a lemonade stand for a lack of permit to run a business, called ICE twice on a Filipino family on the road, and had similar weird disputes to this one they had with me over plants and lawn adornments. It appears they'll have to sell their house to pay me, and they won't be missed. Thank you for all the advice. My sister saved a kid's life and almost got expelled for it. When my sister was in high school, she was the quiet, straight-A type. Never got in trouble, never broke the rules. The kind of student teachers trusted to carry a hall pass without supervision. One day she was in the cafeteria when she noticed a kid, maybe 14, choking at a nearby table. His friends were freaking out, uselessly slapping his back. Without hesitating, my sister ran over, wrapped her arms around him, and did the Heimlich. On the third try, a chunk of food flew out of his mouth, and the kid started breathing again. The cafeteria erupted. She thought that was the end of it, until she got called to the principal's office later that day. Turns out the school had a strict no-touching policy. She was told she had violated school rules and was this close to getting suspended. The only reason she didn't? The kid's mom stormed into the school the next day, absolutely furious that they were punishing the person who saved her son's life. They backed off, but she still got a warning. To this day, my sister jokes that the one time she broke the rules was to literally stop someone from dying. You live by the speakerphone, you are shamed by the speakerphone. I worked in a cubicle farm. There were 4 rows of 4 cubicles. There was one coworker who never used the handset on his phone. Every call he made or received was made using the speaker. He also tended to shout into it, even though it wasn't necessary to raise his voice to be picked up by the microphone. There had been a few complaints from some of us to him, but he ignored them. One Monday morning, he called the doctor's office to report that he was having urinary troubles. He made an appointment for the next morning at 9 o'clock. Then he called our boss to say he'd be coming in late tomorrow. All of this was broadcast via his speaker in loud voice. I talked my wife into calling his extension the next morning while he was at the doctor's office to leave a message using a script I wrote out for her. She did and left the message on his voicemail after blocking her caller ID. When he arrived at the office after the doctor's appointment, he started listening to his voicemail messages on speaker. The first was work-related, but the second was the one my wife left for him. It said something like this: "Mr. Smith, this is Jane from Dr. Smith's office. We need for you to come back here today if possible. You were supposed to give us a urine sample, not a semen sample." He quickly punched the end call button, but it was too late. The whole cube farm erupted in laughter. He knew that it had to be one of us, but didn't recognize the voice. He never used the speakerphone again. Anyway guys, that's going to be all for today. Thank you so much for watching, I appreciate it. If you enjoyed, be sure to hit that like button, it really helps me out. And also, of course, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. So take care everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.